Welcome everyone. Welcome to NAKIVO Backup and Replication Technical Solution Professional Training. And now I will lead you through the modules that we have. So first of all, let me tell you a little bit about this training. This training is designed for technical personnel working with NAKIVO Backup and Replication, and it is intended to let you know how does solution architecture look like, how to implement the solution, how to use the key features, and understand what are the technical advantages of NAKIVO Backup and Replication. And now a couple of words about NAKIVO. It's about training prerequisites first. It requires some basic knowledge about computers, networks, virtualization, and data protection. I think everyone on this training has all the knowledge required, so we'll just move on. Information about NAKIVO. Well, we provide backup and replication for VMware vSphere, and we have recently added backup and replication functionality for AWS EC2. Now you can not only protect your private cloud, but you can also protect your workloads in the public cloud in Amazon. We have more than 11,000 customers, more than 1,100 partners, and more than 100 cloud providers. Let's switch to the solution overview. We provide data protection, which consists of backup and replication, and recovery functionality, which includes instant VM recovery with flash boot, granular recovery for files, Exchange and AD objects, and full recovery for the most flexible recovery options. There is also DR with replica, so you can fail over your critical workloads to a DR site. This solution has the following technical advantages. The first one is flexibility. There is a platforms where you can install NAKIVO Backup and Replication. Those include Virtual Appliance, Windows, Linux, NAS, and AWS Image. The solution has pretty small footprint. It requires up to 4 gigs of RAM by default. And it's scalable. It can protect thousands of VMs at one site or across multiple sites. The performance is supported by global deduplication, which works across the entire repository, and network acceleration to improve the data transfer in WAN environment. The simplicity is backed up by easy installation, which is completed just in a couple of minutes. The web UI can be accessed from anywhere, and backup to cloud is built in. There is also an automated verification of backups and replicas, which can be run on schedule. So let's start with solution architecture. What you will learn in this module is what are the solution components, how the backups are stored in backup repository, what is the scalability of the solution, what are the main licensing concepts, and this is it. So NAKIVO Backup and Replication is designed to back up VMware VMs from ESXi boxes in vSphere environment. We have recently added a functionality that allows to backup AWS EC2 instances. So you can now basically not only backup VMware VMs both locally and in the cloud, but you can also backup cloud environments in the cloud, and also you can take your backups of your cloud environment to your local infrastructure. Supported platforms are VMware vSphere since 4.1 till 6.0 and AWS EC2. This includes all Amazon regions. The data protection is backup, replication, and recovery, and possible backup destinations are on-site, off-site, or in the cloud. So, we have 3 main solution components. These are Director, Transporter, and Backup Repository. Director is the management component, which provides web user interface and the entire management piece of the solution, the entire business logic, configuration, and jobs. Transporter works to move data. It does the compression, deduplication, and encryption, as well as decompression and decryption and whatnot. The transporter manages the backup repository, and the transporter is the main piece where we can scale out. Backup repository is a location for storing backups. It allows you to keep backups, including their data and metadata. It's operated by transporter. and this is just a passive component, but is the most important one. It keeps your backups. Let's start with the director. Director can run on Windows, Linux, or NAS. It runs as a service and it's available HTTPS port, so you can basically establish connection to the director from your web browser and do all the management. I think all of you are familiar with NAKIVO Backup and Replication interface, so I won't explain any more about that. I will just tell that this component is highly parallel. It can run many jobs at the same time, like hundreds of jobs is not a problem for NAKIVO Director. It can process as many VMs as required, since it doesn't handle any actual load, any data. All the heavy work is performed by a transporter. Of course, the director is agentless. It includes built-in database, so you don't have to install any SQL Server instance, you don't have to integrate with MySQL or whatever else. Everything is built in. The director also includes command line interface and API for automation of some tasks. The transporter provides actual backup, replication, and recovery of your data. It does compression, deduplication, and encryption, and it also manages the backup repository. It can run also on Windows, Linux, or NAS. It also runs as a service. It can be integrated with the director on the same machine, or it can be a standalone box, standalone server with a transporter. It listens at port 9446 and it basically waits for commands from director. It is pretty lightweight, efficient, and stateless. The binaries of this transporter are just like 20 megs, but it's quite powerful and it's designed for best performance. It's also highly parallel. It can process multiple VMs at the same time. It can, for instance, easily handle 5 or 10 VMs. It's agentless, doesn't require any agents, and the onboard transporter is always included along with the director. Now let's turn to backup repository. As I said before, it's just a location for storing backups. It's always managed by a transporter. It includes forever incremental data storage. So you don't have classical incremental backup chains or whatever. You just have a big bunch of data, big binary storage, which includes all the blocks, all the backups. Backup repository provides global deduplication. The data is deduplicated globally at backup repository level. Compression, which can be chosen from certain levels, from fast to best. So you can choose what compression will be used in a certain backup repository. So you can choose between the best performance and the best storage savings, basically. Possible destinations are local storage on the transporter, of course. It can be a CIFS or NFS share, or it can be some mounted storage such as iSCSI or Fiber Channel. Now let me explain how backups in the backup repository are stored. So first of all, the backups are forever incremental. The entire VM image is backed up during the first backup. We take all the image, take the entire VM and just place it into the backup repository. Of course, it's split down to blocks and all the blocks are compressed. And here is also the point where deduplication kicks in. The blocks are deduplicated on a repository level. So if a new block must be written to the backup repository, but this block already exists over there, is just not written. So backup repository stores only unique blocks. Of course, you can disable global deduplication feature, and then there will be some duplication of the blocks in the repository. It's totally up to you to do that. But I'd say that global deduplication allows you to save some great amount of space, so it's logical to leave it as is. On the next incremental backups, for example, on Monday, on this picture, like the virtual machine has blocks A and B on Sunday, and then blocks B and C on Monday. Block A is not there anymore. So on Monday, we will back up only the block C. And on Tuesday, we will back up only the block D, since all the other blocks are already present in the backup repository. The data is stored in synthetic mode, so we don't store any like classic full backup file and then incremental backup files. We just store all the relevant blocks, and whenever it is required to recover a recovery point, we just take all the blocks which are referenced by this point. So on the bottom picture, you can see how the backup looks like in the backup repository. It has just 4 unique blocks, and for example, Sunday is related to block A and B. Whenever some recovery point is not needed anymore, for example, the retention policy makes it deletes this recovery point, the blocks which were used by this recovery point, only by this one and no any other recovery point, will be just marked as free. They will be deleted basically. And then this space will be reusable by other blocks. For example, if we delete Sunday point right here, block A will be removed from backup repository, but block B won't be removed because it's also referenced by Monday recovery point. Okay, let's move on. Scalability. Our product is designed to work in large environments, and it can protect thousands of virtual machines across multiple sites, or perhaps at one site. For example, some of our customers back up 3,000 VMs in general, and out of that, about 100 or 200 VMs are backed up at the same time. Some other customers use backup across a couple hundred physical sites, physical offices, so you may not worry about scalability of this product. Horizontal scalability is achieved by deploying additional transporters so that you can process more VMs at the same time. You can deploy transporters at different sites, like one transporter at each site to achieve better data transfer over the WAN, or you can deploy many transporters at a single site if you have some pretty efficient storage and you just need to read more data in parallel and write more data in parallel. Vertical scalability is obviously achieved by adding more RAM and CPU by provisioning more hardware to NAKIVO Backup and Replication. Let's talk about VMware licensing first. By default, the product is supplied with a trial license inside. It's free of charge, it's licensed by source host CPU socket, and this license will expire in 15 days by default. Licensing by source host CPU socket means that the physical hosts where your VMs reside, the VMs that you back up, must be licensed. The hosts which are not backed up should not be licensed. We also do not charge and do not require to license the target hosts where you recover the data or the DR site for replication. Licenses for DR site are not required. The perpetual license is the standard paid license for NAKIVO Backup and Replication. It's also licensed by source host CPU socket, it's paid, and it does not expire at all. When you buy such a license, you buy it forever, and all you can buy later is just the maintenance renewal, basically support and upgrades. Then there is a subscription license, which is per socket. You can purchase a subscription on a socket basis, which will be limited to some amount of time. Other than that, it's just the same perpetual license. It is just cheaper than perpetual license, but it also expires. And there is a subscription license which is available on a per VM basis. You can pay on a pay-as-you-go model per VM per month basis, and then you have to license the number of VMs that you back up or replicate. This license also expires, and such licenses per VM subscription is available to certified NAKIVO cloud providers. Let's switch to Amazon EC2 licensing. NAKIVO licenses for AWS EC2 instances. So, as I told you before, we have recently added a functionality which allows you to back up your AWS EC2 instances with NAKIVO Backup and Replication. Instances can be backed up either in a local Amazon region or across different Amazon regions, and you can also back up your instances off-site, for example to your office or maybe to your home or just to some NAS. So the trial license is the same as for VMware, it's free of charge, it expires in 15 days, and it's licensed by the number of source AWS instances that you back up. And then there is a subscription license, which is also a pay-as-you-go thing. You pay monthly, and this license is also licensed by a number of AWS instances. So the first module is completed, and let's see what we have learned in this module. First of all, data protection is the main purpose of NAKIVO Backup and Replication. The main components of the solution are director, transporter, and backup repository. You should have only one director per customer. Then you can have multiple transporters per organization. The transporters are used to scale out. One transporter is always included into the main full solution install. And then there is a backup repository, which is used to hold your backups. It's using forever incremental synthetic mode for storing backups, and it stores only the unique blocks of data. There are no classic incrementals files, no classic backup chains, which you could see in other backup vendors. We use a different technology for that. It's like a special file system on top of the existing file system. The solution has enterprise scalability. You can protect thousands of VMs with NAKIVO Backup and Replication, and you can do that in one site or across multiple sites. And the licensing options are pretty flexible. You can either license the solution on a perpetual basis, or you can have a subscription. It's totally up to you. The next module is deployment. What we'll learn in this module is what platforms are supported by NAKIVO Backup and Replication, what are the deployment options, and what are the system requirements for NAKIVO Backup and Replication. We will briefly cover the deployment scenarios, and we'll have some performance recommendations observed. The supported platforms, we currently have only 2 platforms supported. This is VMware vSphere since 4.1 till 6.0, and Amazon AWS EC2, which includes all AWS regions, all instance types, and VPC and EC2 Classic. Both are supported. We are also working on Microsoft Hyper-V support. I will speak about this later on during this training. So the deployment options. Basically, you can deploy NAKIVO Backup and Replication using one of the following installation options. This is a virtual appliance, just an OVA that you install on your vSphere into some cluster or host. Alternatively, you can just install on a Windows machine using a Windows installer. You can run a Linux installer to install on a Linux VM, physical box, or something like that. And there is an installer for NAS, which allows you to install directly onto a NAS box, which means that you may basically turn your NAS into a VM backup appliance by installing NAKIVO inside. There is also an Amazon machine image, an AMI, which can be simply deployed in AWS in the cloud. So let's turn to the hardware requirements. If NAKIVO Backup and Replication is running on a VM or on a physical server, it requires 2 CPU cores and 4 gigs of RAM to operate in a default installation mode. If it is a transporter only, the minimum requirement is just 2 gigabytes of RAM, and this thing can run and process about 5 to 10 VMs at the same time. The default number for concurrent tasks per transporter is 6. If NAKIVO Backup and Replication is running inside a NAS device, here you can see what hardware is required. We currently support only Synology NAS devices and Western Digital MyCloud NAS. We also work to add QNAP NAS devices to this list, but it's not done yet. It's currently in progress. As for CPU, we require Intel-based CPU. ARM CPUs in the NAS devices are not supported. And while running on a NAS box, the minimum RAM requirement is squeezed down to just 1 gigabyte of RAM. This means that you may basically install NAKIVO on a low-end NAS box and turn it into a backup appliance for your environment. As for supported operating systems, we of course support Windows as an installation platform, NAKIVO Backup and Replication can install on Windows Server or on desktop version of Windows. By the way, the desktop version is not only Windows 7 and Windows 8, it's also Windows 10. As for Linux, we support Ubuntu, SLES and Red Hat Enterprise Linux. And please be aware that all supported operating systems must be 64-bit. We do not support 32-bit operating systems to install. The first deployment scenario is the simplest one. It's a deployment at a single site, which is pretty suitable for a small business, for a small office environment. You have a ESXi box or perhaps a couple of ESXi boxes with some VMs. It may be a VMware Essentials bundle, for instance, and you just have NAKIVO Backup and Replication inside one of the VMs. It can be either a Windows VM or some Linux VM or a virtual appliance. Virtual appliance is the simplest one to install and configure. Later on I will show you how to do that. Distributed deployment is required when you have multiple VMware offices, multiple sites. In this case, in the site A, in one site you will have just the same deployment as you had in a single site deployment. So both director and transporter are installed in a single VM. And then the second site, which is located somewhere in a different town, for example, it will have just a transporter in a VM, and then this transporter would be connected to the first one. This can be done either by exposing the second transporter at site B over the internet, over some external IP address, or by establishing a persistent VPN connection between sites and having this transporter integrated with the director using some local LAN IP address. So for best performance, we recommend using direct SAN access. This allows you to read data, to retrieve data from the source VMware data stores. Bypassing the local network, you can do it directly from your SAN over iSCSI or fiber channel. For iSCSI SAN, you can basically run NAKIVO Backup and Replication either on a VM or on a physical box, which has direct connection to the SAN. For fiber channel SAN support, of course, you have to deploy NAKIVO Backup and Replication transporter on a physical box which has direct fiber channel connection to the SAN. Network acceleration is a feature that saves your traffic and improves speed when you transfer data over a slow network, for example over internet. This is pretty suitable for off-site backup. Network acceleration requires two transporters on both sides of the WAN to operate. The source transporter would compress the data and squeeze it, and then the second transporter would decompress the data and rehydrate the data basically. And then there is also seeding, which eliminates full backup over the WAN. You can seed the initial full backups and then transfer them physically on a USB drive and connect them at the target site, and then just continue transferring and transmitting only the changes, thus not requiring any full backup over the WAN. The same goes for replication jobs. You can seed the VM replicas and then transfer these VMs and then register them at the target host, at the target vSphere, and replicate on top of the existing VMs which have been registered. Later I will show you how seeding can work. What we have learned in the second module is that supported platforms include VMware vSphere and AWS EC2. You can back up both VMware and Amazon EC2 environments. Deployment options include virtual appliance, Amazon machine image, and install on Windows and Linux. Starting from a couple releases ago, you can also install directly in the NAS box. System requirements have low minimum spec. It is only 4 gigs of RAM in the on-prem install, and it's only 1 gig of RAM if you run on a NAS box. Of course, if your NAS has like 2 or 4 gigs of RAM, it's also good, but 1 gig of RAM works. It works fine. We have tested this internally. Deployment scenarios include single-site deployment and distributed deployment. So you can basically have a NAKIVO deployment either done at a single site, single office, or you can have a distributed thing which includes multiple offices at the same deployment, the same director basically. For better performance, we recommend using direct SAN access and network acceleration. Job seeding eliminates the necessity to transfer the full backup over a slow WAN over internet. Now let's switch to features. NAKIVO Backup and Replication has a lot of features, and we are constantly adding new features. Let's see what we will learn. First of all, we will learn some brief overview and recovery options which are available for NAKIVO Backup and Replication. We will hear something about backup to cloud and integration and automation of tasks in NAKIVO Backup and Replication. Then I will tell you about the upcoming features, the features which are currently being developed and which will be released this year. Let's start with the overview. We have snapshot-based jobs. This means that anytime the backup is done, NAKIVO Backup and Replication will take a snapshot of the source VM, of the original VM, and then we will read the data from this snapshot. This way, we will always take and capture the data which is not being changed while we capture it. We have flexible retention policies. It can be either a straightforward retention policy where you keep just, let's say, 30 latest recovery points or 100 latest points, but it can also be a GFS policy where you keep monthly, weekly and yearly points. You can store up to 1000 recovery points per VM. We support change block tracking, which allows us to speed up the incremental backups and replications. We do not have to read all the VM all the time. VMware CBT just provides us with the information which blocks have changed since the last backup, so we efficiently back up everything that's required. Screenshot verification is a cool feature that allows you to verify your backups and replicas by simply booting them and taking screenshots of them. This feature works on schedule, it's automated, and you don't have to do that manually all the time. You can just set up this screenshot verification to run on a scheduled basis and then receive the screenshots in the email reports. This way you will make sure your backup is bootable and the system is alive. Basically, you can make sure your backup can be recovered. NAKIVO Backup and Replication supports live applications. This means that highly transactional apps such as Microsoft Exchange or SQL Server, they will not have to be powered down to be backed up. You can back up such application while it is live. The consistent backup is achieved through the integration with Microsoft VSS inside this VM. We support automatic reports which are sent over email. We support container protection, so you can not only protect individual VMs, you can also protect containers such as hosts, clusters, or VM folders. And job grouping is just a usability feature which allows you to pack multiple jobs into a group, into a folder, and manage them in bulk. The backup features include automatic backup verification. Whenever a single data block is written into a backup repository, we basically always make sure that the block that was written into the backup repository is just the same block that was read from the original VM. There is a functionality of backup copy jobs. It's a recent feature. It's available since version 6.0, which was released in March. The backup copy feature allows you to have a secondary copy of your backup at an off-site location or in the cloud. It can also be located in the same location. Backup copy improves redundancy, and this way you have not only one copy of your backup, but multiple backups, multiple recovery points of the same VM, and you can always make sure that you are safe with this feature. By the way, the backup copy feature does not require to backup the original VM again. It just takes the first backup and clones it to a secondary location. You can also apply custom retention policy to your backup copy job. Screenshot verification, again, it takes screenshots of your VMs which are booted directly from backups or from the replicas which are temporarily started at the DR site. This is designed to make sure your backups and replicas are good. Backup jobs also support granular recovery. You can recover individual files or application objects such as Exchange emails. Replication. Replication is quite different from the backup. It has smaller RTO and RPO. You can make replications much sooner than the backup, and then recovery from the replica is generally faster. The downside of replication is that you require a secondary site, a DR site, or just a DR server to store your replicas. It will be used to run your replicas in case your primary server fails. This is the price of replication, of course. But then it's very reliable thing, and it allows you to recover your entire environment in just a couple of minutes. The replica is ready to go. The replica is just a copy of your VM as of some point in time. So you basically do not even need NAKIVO Backup and Replication to recover from replica. You can simply start this VM, power on the VM on vSphere host, and start using it. Replication also supports screenshot verification for replicas, so your replicas can be verified on schedule. And there is a quick failover, which can be done by simply turning on your VMs. Recovery capabilities of NAKIVO Backup and Replication includes file-level recovery, which is supported for both Windows and Linux file systems. One important note: to recover files from Linux file systems, NAKIVO Backup and Replication Transporter must run on Linux. Recovery from Windows file systems is supported on all platforms. We have Exchange recovery for emails, so it's granular one. You can recover individual emails without having to flash boot a VM or recover it to a production storage. You can simply pull a single email out of your Exchange backup. Flash VM boot allows you to instantly run VMs from backup. This process takes a couple of minutes and your VM is live on the target host. Flash VM boot is designed for quick recovery of some data or for testing backups, and you can also migrate your VMs running through the flash boot to a production storage. Flash boot is done via mounting the drives from the backup to the real VM. So we basically create a VM on a host and then take its drives, which are in the backup, and present them to ESXi box as virtual RDM drives, as raw disk mappings. This is how Flash VM boot works. There is also Active Directory object recovery. You can recover Active Directory objects such as users and computers. You can recover full VM from backup, just a classic way of recovering things. And you can run DR with your replica if you have a DR site and if you have replication and replicas. Let's talk about cloud support. First of all, we have native AWS EC2 integration. You can integrate with EC2 Cloud just in a couple of clicks. You can set up a transporter and backup repository in AWS and then start backing up to the cloud, which provides you some on-demand backup destination. You can also manually integrate with many other clouds, such as Azure or OpenStack. All that is required to integrate with such cloud is deploying a transporter VM in this cloud, or deploying some Linux VM and installing transporter on it, and creating a backup repository on some mounted storage. Integration and automation. Command line interface allows you triggering some actions in console. So you can use command line interface to simply start or stop a job or view the status of your jobs. This command line interface can be used to integrate NAKIVO Backup and Replication with some monitoring tools, for example. There are pre- and post-job scripts. These scripts can run locally whenever the job is executed. They run before or after the job. It's an optional feature, of course. And there is HTTP API for automation. It can be used to automate nearly anything, including creation of new jobs and management of the existing jobs. Upcoming features include Microsoft Hyper-V support. We are currently working to add support for Hyper-V so that you will be able to back up Hyper-V VMs and restore them. We're initially targeting Hyper-V Server 2012, and then we will also be adding 2016 and 2008. We are also working on the advanced tape integration so that you will be able to back up directly to the tape library and manage the tapes and tape recovery points. And what's also expected to be released this year is object-level recovery for Microsoft SQL Server. Let's see what we have learned in the features module. First of all, we have industry standard feature set for mission-critical data protection. This is just backup and replication for VMware and Amazon. We have extensive recovery capabilities. You can recover files, you can recover individual Exchange or Active Directory objects, you can run Flash VM boot to quickly spin up a VM, and you can also do full recovery or replica recovery. The cloud integration is built in. You don't have to install any additional software or purchase any additional licenses. You can just integrate with the cloud in a couple of clicks by deploying Transporter in Amazon. And you can automate a lot of things with CLI, custom scripts, and APIs. So there is one module left. This is about technical advantages of NAKIVO Backup and Replication. What we will learn in this module is how flexible NAKIVO Backup and Replication is, what are the performance advantages, and what are the simplicity advantages. The latest one is maybe not purely technical, but our customers say it is an advantage, and if we take it from the other side, not requiring to train your customers and not requiring to give an extensive training is also an advantage. So cross-platform install is the flexibility advantage. You can install on many platforms, including virtual appliances. So you just have to deploy an OVA application into your vSphere environment, and this is all you need to do to start backup. Alternatively, you can have it installed on a Windows server or on a Linux server. You can also install the product on the NAS box, on the NAS device by Synology, for example, and this is something that none of our competitors can do. So this turns us into a backup appliance software, and then you can also deploy NAKIVO Backup and Replication in Amazon Cloud as an image, AMI. The solution has pretty small footprint. It requires only 4 GB of RAM for the full solution install, director and transporter. If you install a standalone transporter, for example a transporter at the secondary site, you can give it only 2 gigs of RAM. For the NAS device, it is okay to give it 1 gig of RAM. But please note that Intel-based CPU is required when installing on a NAS device. As for scalability, we can scale out to support pretty large environments. Horizontal scalability with additional transporters and vertical scalability with more RAM and CPU given to NAKIVO Backup and Replication. Global deduplication allows you to save storage space. You don't have to install any third-party software to enable deduplication. The deduplication is inline. It happens on the fly whenever a job is running, so you don't have to run any deduplication in background, or you don't have to integrate it with any hardware. Of course, you can install NAKIVO Backup and Replication and integrate it with a hardware-based deduplication appliance, but if you don't have one, you have global deduplication that works across the entire backup repository. Network acceleration is designed to save bandwidth when transferring over WAN. So if you have your bandwidth pretty limited, or if you have to pay for the used bandwidth, network acceleration is the best option to reduce your costs and improve speed, of course. On average, we can see that The speed in WAN is increased about twice when you use network acceleration. This is just the average data. Easy install. The installation can be completed in less than 5 minutes and just a few clicks. Today I will demo how to install NAKIVO Backup and Replication, and you will see how easy it is. You do not require any extra database or training to install it. Web UI is intuitive and informative. You can access it from any part of the world, given that you have exposed the web UI port to the internet. This way you can manage your backups from home or from any other location. This web UI also provides branding, so you can actually brand the software by installing your own logo and background and providing your own name for the application. This is something that's not available for most of the competitive solutions. They cannot brand their software. Backup to cloud is built in, it works out of box. You can integrate with Amazon Cloud in a couple of clicks, and then you can also support many other clouds by integrating with them manually. And automated verification includes automatic backup verification, which happens at the block level whenever a block is written. You can also verify all your backups on demand by running verification, by enforcing it. And then there is also screenshot verification, which gives you some idea on how your backups can be booted and restored. Let's see what we have learned in this module. Flexibility is supported by cross-platform installation, small product footprint, and enterprise scalability. We have strived to make the product as performant as possible and as small as lightweight as possible. The performance is supported with a global deduplication and network acceleration. All data blocks can be deduplicated across the entire backup repository on the fly. And network acceleration works when you transfer data over the WAN with several transporters. The product is quite simple. You can install it in several minutes. It has a modern time web UI, and backup to cloud is built in. You can verify your backups and replicas automatically by running screenshot verification. Let's proceed to questions and answers session. I will also show a demo during this session. Guys, please ask your questions.
It's always good when there's no questions.
So, you don't have questions, is what I heard?
Yes, I think we come from experience of a competitive product, so we're used to the general benefits of the solution. So you probably won't find us having many questions, to be honest. It looks very similar to what we're used to, but has advantages that you've highlighted. So for us, it looks great.
Yeah, maybe you have some preference on what I should demonstrate today, because my idea was showing some installation, some simple scenarios for backup and restore, and also show a NAS-based install. Maybe you want me to show some specific thing. If so, please tell me.
Yeah, I think certainly from my side, it's Kim talking, by the way, Veneman. I think it would be useful for the guys to see how simple it is to install, and then when you connect to the vCenter, just some best practices around making sure that the hot add mode is enabled, making sure that you've got the VMs grouped properly, making sure you've got the OS, the software components for the VSS, making sure that's done. Just on the call, we've got 3 people who've deployed it and a couple of people who haven't. So it'd be quite nice to just go through the general, this is how you install it, this is what it looks like, this is what it does. This is how you create a backup job. Would probably bring everybody up to the same level, and then we just need to go and deploy more of this because it rocks.
Okay, then this is what we'll start with. Please give me a second. And thanks, Kim, for joining. It's a pleasure to see you here.
As always, sir, it's a pleasure to see you guys.
Okay. Here is my remote session. So this is a demo environment. This VM contains a vCenter server, and it also includes NAKIVO Backup and Replication. The vSphere is pretty simple one. It contains 2 hosts, and now I will show you how to deploy a virtual appliance. I have downloaded one from nakivo.com, but before showing that, please let me show you what options are there for downloading the virtual appliance. So everything, all the installers can be downloaded from the product website by clicking the download free trial. You have to provide your name and email. I will just provide some phone number. It's verifying the email, and then you have all the options to download and install. So here you can see the Windows installer, Linux installer, those are just files, an exe file and Linux shell script that's installing the software. But for virtual appliance we have multiple options. The first one is the most common, is the full solution. It includes director, transporter and backup repository. All components are built into the virtual appliance, and this is the ideal thing for testing the software or for small single-site deployments. There is also an appliance like a full solution without backup repository. This is just the same full solution, but it does not include backup repository on board. This one is useful if you have some storage, some destination like a NAS box, for example, and you don't have to use the local storage backup repository. So this one should be used when you want to connect some external storage to the virtual appliance. The next one is a transporter only virtual appliance. This one is required if you have to deploy an additional transporter at the same site or at a secondary site. And then there is transporter with backup repository. It's a standalone transporter with some local storage configured for backup repository. By default, it includes 500 gigabytes of local storage. Please note that you can deploy it using a thin provisioning, so your backup repository will not take 500 gigs from the very start. And then there is a multi-tenant director virtual appliance, which includes a director component with multi-tenancy feature enabled. Multi-tenancy is another advantage of NAKIVO Backup and Replication. It's especially useful for cloud providers or for large business which have multiple business units. I have already downloaded the full solution appliance. It's here on my computer. As you can see, it's full solution trial.ova version 6.01. So to deploy a virtual appliance, I already have one over here. I will turn it off. To deploy a new virtual appliance, I have to open the vSphere Management Console and deploy the OVF template from here. Then I will browse for this virtual appliance file. Click on the next. As you can see, it contains NAKIVO Backup and Replication version 6.0. Thin provisioned, it takes only 1.5 gigs of space. It comes with Ubuntu inside, and default login and password are root. We have to accept the license. Click next. I will call it a demo, NAKIVO demo. We will choose to run on 28.90 host. And please always make sure to have thin provisioning, otherwise it will consume 500 gigabytes at the very start. So we are ready to complete. I will specify to power on this virtual appliance after deployment and click finish. We can start counting seconds. The appliance itself will be deployed in less than a minute, and then it will also take some time to boot the operating system. So the deployment of the VA has completed successfully. As you can see, we have a NAKIVO demo VM over here. It has not completely booted yet. VMware tools are not running. Oh, it seems the appliance itself has started, because we can see the console of this virtual appliance in this window. So here we can see that it has got an IP address. Luckily, we have DHCP running in this network. In case the virtual network does not have DHCP, you can always have this console to manage the virtual appliance. Like, you can open the network settings, open the network card, and change some settings, like change DHCP, change DNS, and then IP address, and so on. We will not be changing it, but you now have an idea where to look for if your network does not have DHCP and your virtual appliance is installed in such network. If you have multiple network cards, you can also configure them over here. Then there is a backup storage section in the virtual appliance. As you can see, there is a 500 GB disk which is used for backup storage. The backup storage in the virtual appliance is built on top of Linux LVM. So you can connect multiple physical volumes, multiple physical VMDKs to this virtual appliance, and then add them to the common LVM, to the common logical volume, using this menu. The instructions are here on the screen. I will now show you how to add disk drive to the virtual appliance. So we will edit the settings of this VM. Let's imagine 500 gigs is not enough. So we will add a new hard disk. We will create a new disk and, well, add 10 extra gigabytes of storage. It will be thin provisioned, of course. Okay. Ready to complete. Okay. So let's log in to this virtual appliance first. Okay, you see we have two drives over here in this menu. I had to refresh the information using F5 key. So the first one is 500 gigs. It is used in the backup storage, in the backup storage LVM structure. The second one, which is 10 gigabytes, it is not used yet. Let's log into the web UI and see how this statement works. The IP address is 77.155. So we should confirm the security exception for the web browser. It uses self-generated SSL certificate for the web UI. Let's log in. As you can see, we can add a vCenter server here. It will be a vSphere demo. This one is quite small, so it should be added pretty fast. Yep, so we can see our data center, our vSphere, the same environment is added to NAKIVO Backup and Replication. On the next step of the config wizard, we can read some information about transporter, what is a transporter and how to deploy it. I think all of us already know what is a transporter, so we just click got it. We have onboard transporter, which is running at the very same server, you see. and it's using some ports and some configurations. So this is the onboard one, it's always installed by default. And then we have a backup repository. As you can see, it is showing that it has 400 and then almost 86 gigabytes free space. Now we will switch to vSphere client and increase the size of this backup repository by just using the second 10 gigabyte drive as a backup storage. The difference in numbers is probably caused because not all size of the volume is actually available at the file system level. So we should select the new drive and select to use this disk as a backup storage. We have a warning that all existing data on this disk will be deleted. This one is a new one, so we shouldn't care. Just press enter to proceed. It's being configured and now it is used as a backup storage. I'm clicking F5 to refresh, pressing F5. So now, as you can see, both drives are used for backup storage. Now let's return to the web interface and refresh this backup repository. As you can see, the amount of free space in the backup repository has increased by 10 gigabytes. So this is how you scale your backup repository in the virtual appliance in case it is using the local storage. If it is using some shared storage like a NAS, you will not have to do this, of course. So let's click finish, and now we can start creating some jobs. Let's create a VMware vSphere backup job. We can select a couple of VMs to back up. Okay, we'll back them up to the onboard repository. This job can run daily, weekly, can also run on a monthly basis or periodically. If you want to run the job more than once a day, you can schedule it to run every 60 minutes or perhaps every 3 hours. And then you can select which days of the week are required to run this job. You can also run this job on demand, of course. So this is a VMware backup job. This is the name for this job. I will call it name. Application aware mode is enabled, so VSS will be used to backup live applications. In case any error in VSS will be encountered, we will make the backup anyways, but you will get a warning that VSS has failed. You can also select to fail the backup in case we encounter VSS error. I will just leave it a default option. Then there is a change block tracking. You can not use change block tracking. This way a full backup will be done all the time. Then you can use VMware CBT to track changes between backups, and we can use NAKIVO change tracking. We will be using CBT, and here you can specify what to do if CBT fails. I can tell you that CBT is quite a faulty technology. VMware guys didn't fully fix it till the current point. As of version 6, as of vSphere 6, CBT still has some known issues, and therefore it may fail in some cases. So if CBT fails, we will reset CBT on the last retry of the job. Or alternatively, we can fail the VM backup, or switch to NAKIVO change tracking. I will select to switch to NAKIVO change tracking. This is like a fallback strategy if CBT doesn't work. Then we can select to enable screenshot verification. To do this, we should select which host will be used to verify the backups and which data store should be used. We will verify not more than one VM or maybe two VMs simultaneously. Let's set 1. Recovery time objective is 5 minutes. This is basically the time that we will be waiting to take the screenshot. If the OS is not started within this time, the verification will fail. Please let me remind you that screenshot verification, the taking of the screenshot, is available only after the operating system has started. And then the delay of the screenshot is 30 seconds after the OS has booted. Okay, by the way, as for the transport modes, you asked me to show you how to select transport mode, VMware transport mode. This step has the advanced options, and here you can select to truncate exchange logs on all VMs and also to execute local pre or post job scripts. The script will be executed on the server where NAKIVO Backup and Replication is installed. You have to upload the script first, and here you have to specify the path where the script is located. We do not have the scripts, so we will not run them. As for the transport mode, here you can select either SAN only or LAN only. For example, if you have a SAN, you should make sure your VM where NAKIVO is installed can directly access the SAN data stores, and then you can select SAN only mode to run your job. After that, the job will start running in SAN only mode. If SAN is not available, the job will be just failing. For LAN only mode, you can also specify that if you don't want to use SAN for some reason. Automatic selection will try SAN. If SAN is not available, it will fall back to LAN mode. By the way, we are also working to add the hot add mode. It is not available in version 6.0, but we are hoping to release version 6.1, which includes hot add, next month. So we will not change the default options over here. And by the way, one more important trick: if your VM has multiple disk drives, multiple VMDKs, and you don't want to back up one of the VMDKs, you can uncheck some VMDK at the advanced options at the step 2. You can just expand the VM and uncheck the hard disk with a checkbox. But here all my VMs have only one drive, so I will be backing up everything. So I will click finish and run to run the job. Now we'll see that, okay, CBT cannot be enabled for Ubuntu Server 02. And here is why. It can be enabled correctly for powered off VMs. This is a VMware limitation. Basically, CBT can be enabled only for VMs that are powered on. Or you can enable CBT manually and then power off the VM again. It's up to you. So since we have selected to fall back to NAKIVO change tracking, the backup of this Ubuntu Server 02 VM will be done with NAKIVO change tracking technology. The backup is happening. This environment is pretty small and pretty fast, so we should expect it to complete in a couple minutes. In vSphere console, we can see that two virtual machine snapshots were created. One for Ubuntu Server 01 and the second one for Ubuntu Server 02. If we open the snapshot manager, you can see that this is a temporary snapshot. It was created by NAKIVO Backup and Replication. Oh, but since the backup has finished, the snapshot has been removed. And now we can see the most interesting piece of it. You can see that there is Ubuntu Server 01 recovered. This one is used for screenshot verification. Let me show you how it looks like. Right now, screenshot verification is in progress for this VM. The other one is still being backed up, it seems. So this Ubuntu Server 01 recovered was automatically created after the backup of this VM has completed. And now it will be used to verify that the screenshot of this server can be taken. Please note that this server is booted, it's running directly from the backup. If we click on the properties, we can see that the hard drive, it is a physical LAN mounted to the virtual machine. So it's basically a raw device, raw drive. And then the snapshot of this raw drive is taken, but the snapshot itself, the delta file, is stored on the production data store. So it's exposed from NAKIVO Backup, from iSCSI target created by NAKIVO Backup Application at this NAKIVO Backup server. And it seems that Ubuntu Server 02 has finished backing up. Now we are completing the job. We have backed up 4 GB of data. It seems that screenshot verification for both Ubuntu servers will fail due to the fact that there are no VMware tools in these servers. The VMware tools are not installed. To successfully verify the backup with screenshot verification, we have to have VMware tools installed. Let's try to install VMware tools. So this one is mounted. I hope I know some credentials to this Ubuntu server. Nope. Maybe some other password will work. Okay, it seems I don't have credentials to this server, so I won't be able to install VMware tools. But at least we will be able to see that the backup could not be verified because there are no VMware tools running in this recovered server. But since the RTO is 5 minutes, we will still be waiting 5 minutes before failing. So the product will be waiting and giving the operating system the chance to boot. Without the VMware tools, we will not be able to check this. This is why the job will fail. Well, not the job itself, but screenshot verification. Okay guys, do you have any questions for this feature, for anything else that was shown?
I certainly don't know. I think that's cool. Everybody else is quiet.
Yeah, it seems so.
They're chatting away on our internal IM, so they are watching, they are commenting on what they're seeing, so I'm confident it's been productive.
Okay, now let me show you the NAS install. Have you tried installing the product on NAS box?
I'm very interested though, because it seems quite good for those smaller systems that can't afford a dedicated DR box. So I quite like the idea of this.
Yeah, and by the way, as you can see, we have the first message. It will be saying that screenshot verification has failed. Please check if you have VMware tools. Yeah, as you can see here, this is like the error message. SV, screenshot verification of the Ubuntu server, has failed. VMware tools are not available or out of date. So the error messages are pretty clear in most of the cases, and some of the error messages even have the learn more link. So whenever you get an error message, you can click this link and it will throw you to the NAKIVO Backup and Replication knowledge base or to VMware knowledge base, so that you can check what's wrong with your environment and then basically fix this. So this one is saying that please check if you have VMware tools available. Now let me show you the NAS install. So this one is my Synology box. It's a low-end box. Let me show you what's about this box. So this is just DS713 Plus. It has 2 slots for hard disk drives, dual-core CPU and only 1 GB of RAM. This is all this box has, and it is still sufficient to run NAKIVO Backup and Replication. This one already includes NAKIVO. You can go to the Package Center and click the Installed. As you can see, we have NAKIVO Backup and Replication package. It is running. It's version 6.01, deployed on the volume 1. To install NAKIVO Backup and Replication package, you must do the following. First of all, you should go to NAKIVO Backup and Replication download page. And here you can see that there is an installer for NAS. And this is a Synology package. By clicking on this, you will just get the SPK. So it's like a native SPK for Synology. We are currently working with the Synology team to integrate it into their App Store, but so far it's available for downloading as a standalone SPK. So after you download this SPK from Synology or from NAKIVO, you have to enable packages from different publishers, from Synology and trusted publishers, for example, or from any publisher, and apply the settings. After that, you will be able to click Manual Install and provide the package file and click Next. This way, the NAKIVO Backup and Replication package will be installed on Synology. We do already have this package here, so we won't be installing it again. I will just click on it to show you how it runs on Synology. As you can see, it's the same address, the same IP address, 10.30.30.2, just a different port, and we see the same picture. It's NAKIVO Backup and Replication. It does not allow to create jobs for some reason, maybe because the trial license has expired. Let me check. Yep. You see, the license has expired. If the license is expired, the product will stop functioning. We have to provide another license. The license can be provided pretty easily by clicking the Change License. I have some license over here. And I've installed another trial license for another 15 days. So the license is kinda reinstalled. The product can be used again. As you can see, we have a single backup repository with 5 backups. It is located on volume 1. It's a volume inside the Synology NAS. It's the same NAS. The transporter, again, we have a transporter here. So everything is bundled inside this NAS. We can run some recovery. We can recover files from the NAS. Let's recover files from this one. It's Windows Server. It has only one recovery point. It is being loaded. So we have 2 NTFS partitions. The first one is a system partition and the second one is a C drive. You can go to Program Files, NAKIVO Backup and Replication, Transporter. Okay, We can recover a couple of transporter binaries, for example, and just download them. The files are downloaded right to my browser. As you can see, they are recovered pretty fast. Of course, if you recover a lot of data, for example, if you recover, say, 10 gigabytes or a couple hundred gigabytes of data, like a single database file, it makes sense to use Flash VM boot rather than this file recovery, because zipping the files into the zip archive adds some overhead. So we will close this wizard. You can create a job to back up something to this Synology NAS. We have only one host over here. Let's take a Linux VM. It's 6 gigabytes. The job will run on demand. We will use VMware CBT again. We will switch to NAKIVO change tracking immediately if something is wrong with CBT. We will finish this job and run it. Again, CBT cannot be enabled because the VM is not running, it's not powered on. So the backup will be run using NAKIVO change tracking technology, which is probably okay for this case. Right now we're taking the snapshot of this VM and then we'll start backing up this VM to the local NAS environment. So again, when NAKIVO Backup and Replication is running on your NAS, it's a pretty beneficial solution for small business and maybe for bigger business too. Because first of all, this NAS is a self-contained box. If some disaster happens, you can just take your NAS away and then connect it to another infrastructure and restore to some VMware environment, which can be a dissimilar one. It should just run the same version of VMware vSphere and you can restore your VMs. And then you have everything in a single box. You don't have to install like additional Windows servers. You don't have to spend money on Windows licenses whatsoever. How does it look like, Kim?
I think it's really, really impressive. That's really, really cute.
Yep.
Do you guys support the bigger Synology systems as well?
Of course. Our customers sometimes run this on a high-end boxes, which have like quad-core Intel CPUs.
Fantastic.
And like 16 gigs of RAM, for example. And
that's really interesting.
Yeah,
I'm working with a customer at the moment who they're likely to go Hyper-V in the short term, but that's not a big deal right now. But they've got Synology, and normally when we hear people talking about Synology, we think, oh, really low end, not going to work. But actually, if we can make the Synology a backup appliance, it becomes very interesting. And actually, buying two Synology boxes and running copy jobs between them becomes really quite interesting.
Yeah, it's quite possible. You can engage NAKIVO Backup Copy job in this process, or alternatively, you can set up the sync. I think Synology has this feature, like the sync feature, where you sync one NAS into other NAS. While doing that, just make sure that the backup repository is detached. It can be detached in configuration, so that no write operations happen. No I/O is happening other than the sync. But NAKIVO Backup Copy job itself is fine, because you can still run backups to this repository while running backup copy to the other one. That's the most
that's interesting. And presumably that works because you're tracking the individual blocks rather than files.
Yes.
Because even if block E appears, you're actually only interested in block D or C. That's interesting.
Yep.
I quite like it. How is it licensed when it's on? Presumably you still license it per socket, perpetual, because this is just a method of installing the product. It's
Yes.
still licensed the same. Yeah.
Yes,
Fine.
the licensing is totally the same. It is not any different from the licensing on Windows or on Linux. It's just
Brilliant.
like an additional method of installing. And with this Synology install, and I hope that by the end of this year we'll also have QNAP supported. You can actually test the QNAP install as well. But it has some known issues, and we are currently waiting for QNAP team to help us resolve them.
Okay.
It all depends on their new QTS release, basically.
Sure.
But for Synology, we do support DSM 5.2 and 6.0, so the latest DSM is supported, and all Synology boxes that have more than 1 gig or more RAM and Intel-based CPU are supported as well. So you can actually install on high-end Synology box, which has Intel Xeon and 32 gigs of RAM, and it will also work. It will be just more scalable in terms of scale up.
I like the idea of having little boxes like this that you can literally pick up and walk away with. The off-site backup using these looks very interesting. I'm just looking at a DX 2015 or a DX 1215 on their website. They've got scalability up to 160 terabytes. That sounds awesome.
Yes.
You just have these little boxes. How interesting.
Now let me show you a Flash VM boot. Flash VM boot functionality. Basically, screenshot verification was based on Flash VM boot, but now I will show you Flash VM boot alone. We will try to Flash boot something from this backup repository. It has 2 Ubuntu servers, and as you can see here, we have only NAKIVO demo. Oh, let's back up the NAKIVO Backup and Replication server itself. I will power it on so that CBT will be available, and I will not back up the second drive, which is a big one, which is 500 gigs. It takes space for backup storage. I will just back up the root drive.
That's a good question. For recoverability of the NAKIVO appliance itself, do you recommend we back up just the root volume, obviously not the repository? Is that the best way of backing up the NAKIVO system?
Well, if you back up only the root volume, you will be able to recover the NAKIVO appliance itself. But then the backups, you should have them copied somewhere for better reliability.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
This way.
I'm thinking software failure or preparing for a NAKIVO upgrade, for example.
Yeah, the root volume alone is fine. The second volume, which contains backup, is used purely as a backup storage, so it does not contain any management or any binaries.
Great. That's fine. So we should be, of course, using copy jobs for secondary location and so on and so forth. The actual NAKIVO appliance itself, the history, the jobs, the configuration, etc., that's all stored on the root volume. So as long as we back up the VM with the root volume, then that's fine. Wonderful.
Yeah, and even more than that, I can show you which folder to back up. You can just copy the files, copy the data from the specific folder, and this is it.
Okay.
So we will exit to System Console. It's root.
Can be op NAKIVO, whatever it is, isn't it? Yeah. That's the one.
So it's opt NAKIVO director, and then as you can see there is a user data folder. It is the last one. So this is the one that you should back up. It contains all configuration, everything possible.
Wonderful. That's really good to know. Attila, pay attention to that, Attila, for our Saudi friends.
Yep, and this is basically it. So you may not even back up the entire volume, which is still fine because it takes like 1 or 2 gigabytes to back up. It's a small one. As for high availability, you can either engage the VMware HA feature with NAKIVO Backup and Replication Appliance, so it will not fail if the host fails. Alternatively, you can set up a shared storage and create a link from this user data folder to the shared storage.
That's cool.
We have an KB article on that. Let me navigate to that. It's again.
That's interesting.
It's in Help Center. Well, it's like a workaround, of course, but still it can be used to have a standby instance of NAKIVO Backup and Replication. So it's in frequently asked questions, high availability of NAKIVO Backup and Replication. So the shortest and the simplest option is engaging the VMware HA if your VMware license allows that. If it's not supported, you can set up a standby instance and then just create some links from both instances to the shared volume with the user data folder.
That's really, really cool. I like that.
It can be mounted as a network drive, and then you can have a symbolic link to this drive from the user data.
I like that. I really, really like that.
After that, if the primary instance fails, you can power up the secondary instance and it will pick up the user data. The only thing to take care of is not to power up both at the same time.
Of course, of course.
Okay, so our instance has started. I will go to this NAKIVO demo one and back it up. Create another backup job. Take this one. You can see that it's not powered on because the inventory of NAKIVO Backup and Replication was not refreshed. By default, it is automatically refreshed once an hour, every hour. So we'll back up to the same repository. Oops. We will not be backing up the second one, the big volume. We will be backing up only the small one, which is 2 gigabytes. We will run this job on demand. We'll use CBT, of course. So let's run it. I bet it will finish pretty fast. For some reason, CBT is not enabled again. Well, let it be. The snapshot was taken. So it's preparing. By the way, you can click on the speed gauge to see the history. Like over here, we see the bar with the speed. If you click on it, you can see what was the speed during the job run. This may help you troubleshoot something. Like over here, we were not backing up anything, we were just skipping zeros, for example. Because for the second VM, we could not enable CBT, and we had to read the VMDK and skip zeros. For the current job, it's also possible to click on the gauge and see how the speed progresses. We have almost backed up the VM. Just have to wait probably 1 more minute. Since CBT could not be enabled, we may wait more than 1 minute to skip some zeros in the end of the job. So it's running Ubuntu, the snapshot is done, and it's all backed up. Yeah, judging from the speed chart, CBT is not used all the time. So we'll have to wait some more time to back up the VM. And the reason for backing up this one is to show flash boot, but I can basically show flash VM boot for Ubuntu server, just not to make you wait in some more time. By the way, backup copy job is also created from here, and to backup Amazon EC2 you have to add your EC2 environment to the configuration. Guys, do you have any interest in backing up Amazon EC2 environments?
We don't have anybody using EC2, but when the Hyper-V stuff comes along, when you get around to doing that, that's going to be interesting, because we're seeing, certainly in the UK, we're seeing a lot of people looking at Azure as a cost-effective way to go to the cloud, which is interesting. We're reserving judgment at the moment, but we don't have anybody on EC2, but Azure is interesting. So the future is bright. We're seeing a lot of VMware, a lot of Hyper-V interest. So it's good that you guys are working on it, because we're seeing people go that way as well.
By the way, if you want to back up to Azure, our knowledge base contains an article on how to do that. You can just, you can integrate with Azure. It's not possible in one click as we do it with Amazon, but you can integrate manually in 7 steps. So basically, the trick is deploying a VM in Azure with a Windows server or with Ubuntu, for example, mounting some disk to this VM and formatting it, and then just uploading the Linux installer or Windows installer to this machine and installing NAKIVO transporter on this machine. After that, you would have to create a backup repository, and this one will be used as a normal backup destination. Please don't forget to enable network acceleration, of course, because obviously you will be backing up over WAN, and network acceleration will save you time and bandwidth. So
and of course, with network acceleration, you deploy a transporter on the source side as well, wouldn't you? So that you take advantage. Yeah.
But normally you must already have the transporter on your source side, because on the source side you probably have a full solution installed, director and transporter, and in Azure you will have like a standalone transporter and a repository.
Yeah, that's clever.
So the job has completed. It was not using CBT. As you can see, we read a lot of data at the very start, but then the speed was not so good and it was 0 sometimes. This is just because we were skipping zeros, skipping empty space from the VM. And this is all due to the fact that CBT was not used. Normally, if CBT is used, it looks like it's more filled. The graph is more filled with data. Okay, the graph doesn't load for some reason. So let's run a flash VM boot. We click recover and flash VM boot. Okay, something went wrong. Maybe some problem with the network. Have to check. So the VM is not very responsive for some reason. It's eating up a lot of RAM. Well, have to investigate it a little more. But the site cannot be reached, which is not a problem still, because we still have other instances to test. I'll investigate this later. Why is it not reachable? And in the meantime, I'll use another machine to run flashboot. It's .182, and I will power off the first one. Luckily, the second one is alive. So we have a VMware backup job with the Ubuntu server and Windows 7. Let's boot a Windows server. We will run flash VM boot and use Windows 7 backup. As a target host for flash boot, we will use the same host, the same SSD storage, and will not connect this VM to any virtual network. The job will run on demand. The VM will be powered on, and we will give it a name, not recovered but flash boot. Finish and run. So the job is starting. Let's look at the vSphere. As you can see, we added iSCSI static targets and have rescanned the HBA of the host. The new VM was created, Windows 7 flash boot, and it was powered on. So now we are waiting until it will boot, and then it will be usable just the same way as any normal VM. Start normally. So as you can see, this VM is being started. It's running directly from backup. The changes to this VM are kept on the temporary snapshot, the snapshot on the production data store, but the main drive of this VM is a RDM drive. So we can try to log in. Let's see if I know the password to this one. Yep, it has started finally. So I think this is it for the flash boot demo. So in the web UI, we can see that the VM is online. This job will be in this state until you click discard VMs. After clicking discard, the booted VMs will be deleted. So again, as you can see, there is no flash boot VM anymore. Okay, guys, do you have other questions?
Is it possible taking a flash VM and bringing it back into production?
Yes, there are two ways to do this. The first way is possible right now. You can replicate this VM using NAKIVO replication job. You can replicate a copy of this VM to production storage, and after that you can just power off the flash boot VM, replicate it again, and power on the VM at
that makes
production.
sense.
After that you can discard the original flash boot VM. In version 6.1 we're adding support for storage vMotion, so you will be just able to migrate this VM with zero downtime and forget about it.
Fantastic. Sounds really, really interesting.
After that you will be clicking discard VMs, but this VM will not be removed. It will stay at production data store, but only after it has been migrated.
Great.
Okay, so
wonderful.
Do you have more questions?
I don't. I'm happy. I like it. Surely somebody's got a question. No? Fine.
Hi, it's Stephen here.
Hi, Stephen.
I saw in the Appliance console we had a software update option in there. Is that the best way to go about an update? And can you just take us through that process, please?
Okay, just a second. So I'll boot my other appliance. As of now, we do not have automatic updates. So to update the NAKIVO appliance, you first would have to download the Linux installer. From here, the Linux installer will be used to update the software in the virtual appliance. And then you can just upload it to the software updates folder. Right now there are no updates, So you have to upload the installer of the newer version to the opt/nakivo/updates directory. After that, it will appear here in this list, and you will be able to just push the button and the update will be applied. This is how the appliance can be updated.
That's great, thank you.
No problem. You can also read about updating the software in Help Center. For example, to update the deployment on the NAS system on Synology, you just have to install a new package. It will update the previous package installed on this NAS system. To update on Windows, you should run the Windows installer again, and it will update the system that's installed currently. The same goes for Linux. So this
how do transporters get updated?
They get updated just the same as the main install by the installer. So the installer will detect that the standalone transporter is installed and it will update it. You have to run the updater on the transporter machine.
Wonderful.
Okay, any more questions? Okay, thank you guys. Thanks for joining me and listening to this training. So, as a summary, after passing this training, you must understand the solution architecture, be able to install the solution, implement it in the customer site, know what are the features and how to use the key features, and also understand the key solution advantages over other solutions in the market. There are some final steps to complete this training. To complete this process, you should pass the certification test, which is available at the NAKIVO partner portal. The test is a pretty sized one. It contains, I think, around 60 questions, which you have to answer. Nick will send you the link to the test after this training. Please note that if you don't know answer to any of the questions, you can refer to the document, to the PDF educational material that we have sent you before the training. You should have like a PDF for 50 pages or about so. Did you get it? I think Nick has sent it yesterday.
I think I will send it once more along with the link to questions to the tests.
Yep. Okay, this works for me. So after you take the test, we will have to check the answers. It will take us some time. And then we'll send you the certificate, the certification results. This is it. Thanks for your time and have a good day.